Good morning, everyone. Ambassador Kosh coming with a brand new work video. And this morning, it's for it's for me. It's morning. I'm at work. I'm on my break time now. But yeah, it's 6 a.m. my time, and I've already been up a couple hours. But I wanted to bring you all a brand new video, and these seem to be popular, and along with my truck video and everything. If y'all are enjoying these particular type of videos where I'm at work, then I will keep it going. But yeah, this morning we're going to continue our journey through pop culture of the 1980s. And this one's going to be the obligatory Empire Strikes Back video. But we're going to approach this from kind of a different angle. We're going to meld, kind of mesh together how Empire obviously have a very strong impact on the 1980s, but we're also going to address a issue that has come up in the last little bit and everything involving one Mr. Rian Johnson and everything. And an interview that he did, I think it was through CNN News and everything. I think it was it was after, excuse me, it was after The Last Jedi came out or somewhere along the way. And the interview, I remember, Mark Hamill was also there. Gotta love the poor man. You gotta feel for Mark Hamill. I don't agree with him so much on the political and social side of things, but as far as him as an artist and an actor and a voice actor, Mark, if you ever get to see this, man, we feel for you. Right here. But anyway, getting into the video proper. Most everybody knows at this point that the 1980s kicked off in a very big way with Empire Strikes Back and the build up to it. You had 3 years after Star Wars, now known as everybody knows now, Episode 4, New Hope. But at the time, it was just known as Star Wars, period. But yeah, to say there was build up for this movie and anticipation for Empire Strikes Back was an understatement. And everybody knows at this time the story behind Empire and all of this, but I'll touch on it just a little bit and how I felt about it personally. Empire Strikes Back has been regarded as one of the, not just as one of the best, as the best Star Wars movie or one of the best in the series, but just in general as a great piece of cinema. It was a great movie. The tone, the tenor, the technological advances that they made, the repurposing of old technology or pre-existing technology or art forms that were used to create Empire were outstanding. They even upped their game in terms of the shots that they were able to do in comparison from the first Star Wars going into Empire, because you have the battle on Hoth and they use a lot of stop motion and they melded that with models and so on, and it was done very well, and you had it melded with live action because in particular you had the section and everything with Luke and everything after his speeder crashes, and you see that giant AT-AT foot come down near him, and then eventually it comes crashing down on his snow speeder, and then you've got him rappelling up into the underbelly of the AT-AT, and that whole sequence right there was just, if you really break it down, that was a lot of moving parts because they had to build that foot and everything, at least the better part of it, so that it had enough force when it came crashing down onto that mock-up of the crashed snowspeeder. You felt the impact. You felt Luke was in real danger there. But then you have the space chase, a good space chase, not a long, boring, meandering snow chase, just a leisurely chase through space like you have in The Last Jedi. This chase between the Millennium Falcon and Vader's Armada, it had weight to it. Now, granted, you didn't have whole sprawl of Star Destroyers chasing after Han and Leia and Chewie and 3PO in the Falcon. But you felt a real sense of danger. There was real weight to that chase through the asteroid field. They go inside the asteroid field and then they find out that they're inside this giant space slug. And just that whole sequence was so very well done. And then, of course, you've got a much higher intensity saber fight between Vader and Luke. And granted, it's not like what you see in the Phantom Menace or any of the prequel movies when you have the Jedi and the Sith at the height of their power and the height of their ability, and you've got these guys doing these flips and kicks and using all these force abilities and all this other stuff. And it's by no means on the same level as the duel between Yoda and the Emperor in Revenge of the Sith, but still, this fight, this is a very personal fight. Now, I'm not saying any of the other fights are personal, but you feel there's a real weight to this battle between Vader and Luke. And obviously, you have the big reveal, and you don't know if he's telling the truth, if he's lying through his teeth, but then eventually you do find out, obviously in Return of the Jedi, Vader is his father. Anakin is Luke's father. But this battle between Luke and Vader wasn't so much, it was a lightsaber fight, or a lightsaber duel, but it was also a battle of wills. Because Luke is jumping the gun. You've got Yoda and Obi-Wan telling him, look, you aren't ready to do this. You aren't ready to go face Vader. He's going to whip. He may very well kill you. But Luke's like, I don't care. My friends are in danger. I've got to go help them. Even if I fail, I've got to try. And I think for Luke, that's a very powerful moment. And you see the expression on Yoda's and Obi-Wan's face, especially Yoda's face and everything, when Luke says, I'm going. And Yoda and Obi-Wan say, you could get killed. And he's like, if that's my fate, it's my fate. And Yoda's like, dang, this kid's serious. He's going. Yeah, he's doing it. He's going all half-cocked and everything, but he's still going. He's showing a level of fearlessness and determination that I don't think Yoda has seen in a very long time. And I might be misreading this, but that's just my own interpretation of that whole exchange there on Dagobah. But kind of getting back into the impact that Empire Strikes Back had on pop culture of the 1980s. You had an absolute explosion of science fiction and fantasy movies coming out in that decade. And Empire's fingers influence was everywhere in the 80s because you had every studio, big and small, trying to come out with the next big thing. They were trying to claim their piece of the science fiction fantasy pie that was so prevalent in Hollywood at the time. And you had some really good movies that came out in that decade, and I've already covered a few of them. But they may not have been popular at the time, but they built a cult following over time, and they have withstood all the passage of years. And then you had some duds. You had some outright duds that did not work. Nobody liked it. Nobody wanted to necessarily see it. But then you had this other sci-fi movie come out, and you want to categorize different forms of science fiction. Star Wars is more science fiction fantasy, whereas with maybe Star Trek, that's science fiction future. It could be set in a possible future that could still happen. And a couple of years later and everything, in 1982, you have Star Trek II Wrath of Khan, which a lot of people regard not just as a good or a great Star Trek movie, but again as a great movie just unto itself. But and I'm not going to do a full review of Wrath of Khan here. I'm going to do that for another video, because obviously Star Trek and anything, you have, I can't remember, I know for a fact episode Star Trek 2, 3, and 4 all came out in the 1980s. I can't remember if Star Trek 5, The Final Frontier, was 80s or 90s. I'll have to go back and double check. But kind of getting into Mr. Johnson's opinion, and look, I'm not saying the man isn't entitled to his opinion. He is. If he did not like Empire Strikes Back, okay, fine. But him throwing shade, trying to, in an effort to defend his own contribution, if you want to even call it that, to the Star Wars franchise, saying that Empire, either one, was a divisive and not well-received movie at the time, and two, the fact that if Empire had come out today, it would have been very negatively received. And I've got some arguments against that and everything, and this isn't just my opinion and everything. I mean, this is partially my opinion. Obviously, this is me talking to y'all and everything, expressing my opinion. But I'm going to try and give you some facts here. If what Mr. Johnson says is true, and Empire Strikes Back was so poorly received and not very well liked, then why was it such a financial success? Why did it have such a large impact on the general audience, and not to mention the growing Star Wars fan base that became larger in the aftermath of Empire? And if you want to really compare Empire Strikes Back and The Last Jedi, then answer this, Mr. Johnson. I doubt you'll ever see this, but even if you do, okay, Mr. Johnson, I'm gonna take you to task. If Empire Strikes Back was so unliked and so divisive, then why was there such a thirst and hunger for new Star Wars media? And why is it, in comparison to your movie, The Last Jedi, that you have turned off the fan base, ticked off the general public, and enthusiasm and hunger for Star Wars, new Star Wars in particular, has pretty much dried up and gone away? Now, yeah, you've still got all the other material that came out before your movie, and whether you like the Force Awakens or not, we're not here to debate that. But why is it, Mr. Johnson, if Empire was so divisive, there was such a positive reaction to it, and why, when it was re-released in the 1990s during the special editions release, and people went out and put their hard-earned money to see the special edition with added effects, and for a lot of people to see Star Wars on the big screen for the first time, or even for the first time in a long time? And why is it that in comparison to your movie, The Last Jedi, people have, by and large, ignored or forgotten your movie? Or even if they do remember, all they remember is the fact that you troll people and call them toxic man babies or basement dwellers or whatever else insult that you care to sling at the Star Wars fan base from Twitter or in an interview or whatever other way you deem necessary. Now, if Empire Strikes Back had bombed, I don't think Mr. George Lucas would have taken it on the chin quite as drastically as you did. Granted, Twitter did not exist in the 1980s. He may have made a comment in an interview after the fact or whatever, but he was still gone on with his life. You, Mr. Johnson, have made a concerted effort to attack the fan base and attack the general public because we did not like your movie. We did not like the fact that you put unneeded or unwanted humor into Star Wars. Now, yeah, you've got funny. Now, I will say this: Empire Strikes Back has some great funny moments, but they fit within the universe and they fit within the narrative of the movie. You have at the beginning of your movie, Mr. Johnson, a yo mama joke. Now, really think about that for a moment. Does a yo mama joke fit in the Star Wars universe? No, it doesn't. It absolutely doesn't. And I know this is a point that a lot of people have made before. But here's another point. If Empire Strikes Back had been so divisive and so unpopular, then why did the merchandise for that movie and all the other subsequent movies, why was it sold out? Why has it increased in value? And why is it in the aftermath of your movie that merchandise for even The Last Jedi still sits on store shelves unsold or is sitting in a discount store at this point because it won't sell? If someone enjoys a movie and there is merchandise that can be bought for said movie, people are going to go out and buy it. Even now, with the Black Series of Star Wars, you've got figures from Empire Strikes Back that can't stay on shelves or stay on peg hooks long enough to collect dust. But years later, you still got Black Series Vice Admiral Holdos still sitting on store shelves because no one wants the character. Nobody liked her. You made her unlikable. And here's the crazy thing. Laura Dern is a good actress. She's done good movies. Off the top of my head, Jurassic Park. I mean, I'm sure she's done other movies, but that's the one she's most recognized for. But if Empire had been so unpopular, then the toys for that movie would have sat on shelves and collected dust. They didn't. They sold out. And people still have them to this day, or they have bought them secondhand and had to rebuild them or repair them or whatever. But you know what? It's a show of respect for that property. It's a show of respect for that movie. And one other point I will make here. If Empire Strikes Back had been so unpopular, then why did, and I've already kind of alluded to this point, why was every major and minor studio in Hollywood and just in probably worldwide trying to come out with their own Empire Strikes Back? Why were they trying to get their piece of the science fiction fantasy market? Whereas your movie, it cost a lot of people a lot of money because you don't have a respect for the Star Wars franchise. You were brought in by Kathleen Kennedy because you said all the right things and you said you were going to, you shared her vision for empowering women. Well, excuse me for being blunt here, but Star Wars was not about a social justice agenda. It never was, never has been. Now, the closest argument you could make about Lucas making some sort of comment about society that he grew up in terms of Star Wars could be in Return of the Jedi, where you have the Empire fighting against the Ewoks. Because Lucas himself has said that he very much admired this idea of a less technologically advanced or less well-organized military force going up against a very well-equipped and very powerful force and winning. And he's making allusion to the fact that the United States the United States military at the time in the 1970s when the U.S. was in Vietnam got fought in a war of attrition against a military force that we didn't take that seriously. And I'm not going to go into a big history lesson here, folks, trust me. But you made The Last Jedi, and you had that whole section on Canto Bight, which was completely unnecessary and unwarranted, just so you can make a comment about animal abuse and slavery. Now, I'm not saying either one of these things are a good thing. They are not. They are something that should be stamped out and should be spoken out against. But, and even to another point, how capitalism is bad. Well, guess what? If capitalism is so bad, then your movie wouldn't have had the money for it to be made. And people wouldn't have the money to go out and watch your movie. Star Wars has first and foremost been a modern take on mythological themes. And you can watch the documentary Empire of Dreams. And this point is very well made, and I won't go into it here. Empire Strikes Back is an iconoclast of a film. It stands unto itself. Is it the part of a larger story? Yes, it is. But it stands unto itself because it is an achievement of cinematic talent. It was well written. It was well acted. It was well directed and produced. It was made by people that had talent and vision and enthusiasm to bring this world to life. Your movie, Mr. Johnson, is a pale comparison. It does not even stand in the same league as Empire or other movies that were influenced or inspired by Empire, one of which I have listed here, The Wrath of Khan. You could even say that the dark tone and tenor of Empire Strikes Back has been something that's been echoed in other movies that have stood unto themselves. And one that just comes to mind that came out within the last 11 years, The Dark Knight. That movie itself has a very dark tone and tenor, which I think is a echo of what George Lucas and Irving Kershner did in Empire Strikes Back. Your movie, Mr. Johnson, is a joke. And not even a good one. It's a bad joke. And it's a bad movie. And that's why it has turned off the fan base of Star Wars. That's why there is apathy for this last movie that was coming out. And I will not even acknowledge it by speaking its name. And this is just something I'm going to tell y'all. I am not going to see episode 9, so there will be no review, even though I don't do reviews of modern movies per se. I do older movies, obviously. But for those of you who might be expecting me to do a Rise of Skywalker review, one's not going to be coming because I refuse to go see it. But to kind of wind this up, Empire Strikes Back had an impact on the pop culture of the 1980s. It has some of the most quotable lines and most memorable scenes ever put to film. It has one of the most rousing and beautiful and powerful pieces of music ever composed by man, at least in the modern era. John Williams is a master when it comes to composing music, and when he composed the Imperial March, he gave us a piece of music that still can evoke feelings deep in the human soul. The only thing, Mr. Johnson, that your movie evokes is a gag reflex. So, guys, I know this might have been a little bit of a more negative review, but I still wanted to speak on Empire Strikes Back, and I wanted to address what Mr. Johnson had to say about his feelings on it. And again, I say, he's entitled to his opinion, but when he's trying to throw one movie under the bus to defend his own, I'm sorry, it's not going to slide. Never. So until next time, my friends, this is Ambassador Kosh saying, I have always been here.